Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bill Gaventa, one of the officers in the Collaborative on Faith and Disability, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our April webinar, our Faith and Disability webinar series. Today we're going to be doing a discussion and an interview with two advocates or self-advocates, how people might call different kinds of names, and we may talk about that as part of this, for them to talk about the connections between their advocacy and their faith or faith traditions and their involvement in their own faith communities. Our two speakers are Liz Weintraub and Laura Rabe. I will be introducing them in just a couple of minutes. Liz, if you don't see her on your screen at the moment, it's because she's, last I knew, was in a cab not far from the AUCD office in DC. So hopefully she'll be joining us in just a minute. Next slide, Courtney. The mission of the collaborative, the vision and mission of the Collaborative on Faith and Disabilities is that people with disabilities and their families will have compelling opportunities and supports to develop and express their spirituality, engage in congregational life, and share their gifts and talents in ways that are personally valued and that strengthen communities. Our mission is to support people with disabilities, their families, and those who support them by providing national and international leadership in the areas of research, education, service, and dissemination related to disability, religion, and inclusive supports. Those four areas of research, education, service, and dissemination are related also to the major goals and areas of focus for each of the University Centers of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And at the moment, the collaborative its primary membership has come out of a number of the University Centers of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. There's a network of about 65 of the university centers, UCEDs, as are commonly referred to, around the country, under the label, under the umbrella organization of the Association of University Centers on Disabilities. 14, 15, and now I think even more of these have had some interest and done some work or are doing some work in exploring the role of faith and spiritual supports in the lives of people with disabilities and their families. Next slide, please. A few important notes. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted soon on the Collaborative on Faith and Disability website. All the slides, the mentioned resources, and several links will be posted along with the webinar recording. And questions can be submitted in the chat box for discussion after the presentations. We will read posted questions to the presenters during the Q&A at the end of the webinar or our discussion, although for today, I might read some during the discussion to keep the discussion more spontaneous. And our time is going to be brief, and our presenters will be as well. Most webinars have presenters doing a series of slides and a presentation. Today, our webinar is going to be in the format of a discussion between Liz Weintraub, Laura Rabe, and myself, and hopefully you listening in to us and also asking the questions that you might have. Next slide, please. So our faith foundations for advocacy. I'm delighted to have Liz Weintraub and Laura Rabe with me today. Liz is not here yet, and I hope she'll be joining us very shortly. But next slide, I want to tell you a little bit more about each of them. Liz Weintraub is the Senior Policy Specialist for the Association of University Centers on Disabilities, and I think she is sitting down at her desk as I'm introducing her.
I'm sorry that I'm a few minutes late.
Don't worry about it. I'm just introducing you. We're fine. She does wears a number of hats at AUCD, working with advocates and others, and host Tuesdays with Liz, which is a online video policy discussion where she's the interviewer, not the interviewee. She's the interviewer talking to people who are in DC and are working on a variety of issues related to people with disabilities and their families. It's a Tuesdays with Liz is primarily meant to be a video for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families, but anybody can watch them. And Liz has been quite the interviewer. Laura Rabe is from Virginia, in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. She is a writer, a blogger, and increasingly more of a public advocate through her own website, laurarabe.com, which you see. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. Back one. Each of them have got some other places where you can see and hear them in operation. On the Tuesdays with Liz broadcast, Liz has done a couple of sessions on the Jewish Disability Access Inclusion Month, and she recently also interviewed Shelley Christensen about her book From Longing to Belonging. Laura has, on her website, has an interview where she was interviewed by Jeff McNair at a That All May Worship conference, sponsored by the Faith Inclusion Network, which is how I first met Laura. In fact, at the conference where this interview took place, and it's a discussion on self-advocacy and how to thrive with a disability in your church. Next slide, please. So we're going to get started. They've seen these questions before and had a chance to think about their answers. Laura, let me ask you first. Liz, I'll give you a chance to settle down a bit for a second, but I've said a little bit about each of you in the introduction, but can you tell us a little bit more about your religious story and faith tradition?
Sure. I grew up in the same church my whole life, so that has made my experience at church a little different. I was around the same crowd growing up, and I did the same things my brothers or friends did. I was just a part of youth group and went on retreats, and back then I felt like my advocacy was just not really the same. I was just wanted to be seen as a normal person is what I would say. And so as I became an adult and went away to college and then returned home, I thought, oh, it's different being part of my church now that I'm an adult. And so I had to think about how to be involved in a new way. And a few years ago, I taught the preschool kids for 4 years. And nowadays, I am a youth leader for 7th graders, girls.
That's not an easy job, at least in my experience. Okay, terrific. And what kind of church is it?
Reformed Presbyterian.
Reformed Presbyterian, okay. Okay. All right, Liz, would you tell a little bit more about your faith tradition and story?
Yes, and thank you, and I apologize for not being here right on time. But anyway, I grew up in I would call it pretty religious family. Although we never went to religious services on a weekly basis, although we lit the candles on Shabbat, which is Friday night, and Friday night we would always celebrate it as family. When there was some misception just because we were away or whatever, but on a normal basis, that was Friday night was family time. And I would go to religious school from kindergarten through confirmation, which is 10th grade. I didn't get a bat mitzvah just because my parents at that time didn't believe in having a bat mitzvah when you were a bat mitzvah for girls. It wasn't common in the 70s for girls to have one. I did get a bat mitzvah when I was an adult a few years ago, just because I felt like I was missing something.
Where are you involved now?
What?
Where are you involved now?
Well, I wanted to back up by saying when I was in New Jersey, and when I was living in New Jersey, I somehow lost contact with my religion. I knew that I was Jewish. I knew that I come from a Jewish family. I would come home for the major Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover. But beyond that, I never really went to religious services because I didn't feel welcome in the movement. Speed along. When I moved to the Washington area, there was 2 reasons why I wanted to get back into the religion. I met my husband. He really encouraged me to become involved with my religion. Hard to imagine because he doesn't come from a very religious background. My provider is my provider is a faith-based provider. So the emeritus of the provider that we get services from really encouraged me to believe in my religion, and therefore we belong to a conservative couple in the Rockville area, and we go to services just like anyone else. I must say that we don't do that on a weekly basis, although we try to go once or twice a month.
Okay, terrific. So, Laura, could tell us a bit more. I want both of you to do this, but Laura, tell us a bit more about your work in advocacy. And how do you, when you talk about that, how do you define yourself? Or you say self-advocate, advocate? How do you define that, and what kinds of things do you do?
Let's see. Well, I know I talked about spreading awareness and sharing about my life with a disability. And so to me, that is just advocacy in action. And I also feel like I am constantly building inclusion or just helping people understand what that looks like in order to show this is how I can thrive. And it's not just me advocating, it's somebody else helping to invite me into the space, whether it's a church service or a church event or just being a part of a friend's world, going to their house. So I feel like through my writing and my speaking and just everyday conversations, that's my chance to build some awareness And as an adult, I've noticed how much I need to do that more, because when I was meeting people on a Sunday morning, I'm like, I can't have a long conversation about disability in the middle of a crowded space. And so that opened my eyes to see I have this blog over here and I can use it as a tool to show people what my life is really like outside of the church space. And actually teaching the kids brought a new awareness to my life thing, because they would ask me questions. They had no filter. They would just turn around in the middle of class and say, hey, why don't you wear high heels? Hey, does somebody help you get dressed? Or hey, do you take your wheelchair in the shower? Just like questions you're like, oh, that's kind of funny that you say that. But it was opening my perspective at the same time.
Okay, great. Liz?
Your question is more on
advocacy. What do you do as an advocate?
Well, in the Jewish faith, the only thing I really do in the Jewish space is I'm the co-chair of our inclusion committee. I do enjoy talking about my faith. That wasn't always the case. I have learned to like it. Although I have been an advocate all my life.
So let's talk about that. We'll come back to your congregation and your synagogue, but talk about the kind of advocacy you've done in your life in the area of disability.
I go up on the hill, Capitol Hill. I try to encourage people to become an advocate on themselves. I go up on Capitol Hill or other places where I talk about inclusion. I fight for people's rights, our rights, I should say, because I'm included in that. During the Medicaid fight, I was on the Hill almost on a daily basis, talking about the fighting for that. On Tuesdays with Liz, in a way, I'm doing advocacy because I believe that if I make policy in a easier way for people to understand, then they can go up on Capitol Hill to explain it for themselves. I just really enjoy advocating for people.
And that you're the one, I think, who helped me learn the distinction, because I think it was several years ago, one time when I heard you talking, maybe at an AUCD conference, and you were introduced as a leading self-advocate. I think you were the one who said, no, I don't consider myself a self-advocate. I consider myself an advocate. Can you, if that was you, can you tell us about why that's?
It was probably me, because a lot of them, I'm probably in the minority for saying this. And a lot of my friends and I still have argument about this, because when I advocate to my boss or to my friends, I mean to my husband, or either about something I want in my life, a raise, or what I want for dinner, or where I want to go for vacation, or wherever, whatever. I am a self-advocate, and I'm very proud of me being a self-advocate, because I didn't know how to be a self-advocate in New Jersey. I had to learn how to become a self-advocate. But once I am a self-advocate, I can't stop there.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be an advocate. When I'm on the Hill, when I talk to people on for Tuesdays with Liz, just where I was this morning, I was advocating for people to have jobs. I can't be a self-advocate because the word self means self, like myself. And I'm an advocate just like you are, just like my boss, just like Andy and Pradu. He's an advocate. And also the word, if you think of it, and I learned this along at my job before this, I used to work for the Counseling Quality Leadership, where I'm very proud that I worked there, and I would often lead focus groups for people with disabilities, and people would say, you'll have 10 or 15 self-advocates in your group. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they say, it's people with disability. It's the new term that we use rather than the R word, the C word. And for those of you who don't know what the C word is client. And I hope you all know what the R word means, which is retarded. The self-advocate has become a new label for people, and it's better than those words, retarded or other words. Yes, I understand it's a better word, and I'm really proud to become I'm really proud that I'm a self-advocate when I talk to my husband or whatever, whoever, about things that I want in my life. But I don't want to be a self-advocate all my life. I want to, it's just becoming a label.
It must have been you who I heard that from, because it stuck at you. That was a wonderful articulation. Courtney, could you move on the next slide? So, Laura, what you said a little bit about how'd you become an advocate, or what led you to become? It was something you said about going away to college and then coming back and finding yourself as a young adult. Is that could you say some more about that?
Yeah, so before college, I can see a type of advocacy, which I would call structural advocacy, where I was focused more on teaching people how to help me, say like physically, how to assist me if I need to get out of my wheelchair or go to the bathroom or eat some food or go on a youth retreat. It was more about those types of details. And so I went away to college, which was a good season for me to practice independence and being away from my home and being in new crowds. So after college, I returned to my home and my home church, and then you're not seeing the same people that you saw in childhood. So as an adult, I learned the importance of relational advocacy. And so the difference is structural advocacy is I was teaching people how to help me. And now as relational advocacy, I'm teaching people how to see me, because I want to be seen as a person and not like defined by my disability that is visible the instant somebody meets me. And I think along the way when I was teaching, the preschool kids, they were asking me these questions and they were helping me to think about my limits in a new way. And I'm thinking about, oh, well, I have all these new adult friends and they might be wondering some of these same questions, but I wasn't opening up the discussion at first. I was just kind of like, I knew I had my disability and I knew I had my limits in a way, but I had to work through them to understand what it could be like for somebody to meet me. And that helped me to say, hey, you can ask me any questions. And I started to be upfront about opening up these conversations and giving people the option to ask what might feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, hey, it's okay. You can ask me that. I'm okay with this. And I feel like breaking those invisible barriers helped me to connect with these people even more and build new, like, real friendships. And that kind of changed the atmosphere at my own church as I was in a new crowd. So I feel like I was like, oh, well, now this is how I can actually help build community and be an advocate right here where I live.
Okay, so I meant seeing yourself and then seeing others in different ways so they could see you in a different way.
Yeah, and it kind of broke down those barriers. And then when it just helps me to articulate it as I go out other places.
Okay. Liz, so what led you to become an advocate? You said you've been doing it for a long time. What led you to want to do that?
I guess I was probably 18, 19 years old, typical. And I was talking to my my parents, and I really wanted to help people to learn how to I really wanted to be an advocate myself.
Okay.
And I wanted to speak up. And once I knew how to do that, and I said, I learned late in life. And when I mean late in life, I was 25 when I said no to my mom and dad for the first time on a major issue.
Okay.
That's late in life, in my mind. And so once I learned how to do that, I knew I could not just be doing it for myself. Somehow that didn't sound right to me. I needed to help others.
Did you have any models or people that you looked up to as advocates back in those days and say I want to do what they do?
Yes, my friend Tia Nellis.
Okay.
And my friend Nancy Ward.
Okay.
And I guess also my other friend Pat Gerke really helped. And all of them Bill.
Yep.
And Pat didn't necessarily help me. I didn't necessarily want to be a role model, be like her.
Right.
She was the one that taught me how to speak up. I remember clearly, I said to Pat, I wasn't happy about where I was living in New Jersey, and I won't go into those details. But I said, Pat, why can't you talk to my parents? Why can't you talk to my parents? It's too scary to talk to my parents. My parents would yell at me. My parents would get angry at me. And with them no longer here, it's hard for me to say that without tearing up. But and she said, no, you need to advocate. You need to speak up. You need to do the work. And we went around and around and we practiced. And eventually I spoke up, and eventually it was fine. But it was hard. It was very hard.
Well, if it helps any, it took me a long time, and I was 25 or older sometimes before I said some things to my parents that should have been said earlier. So don't put yourself down for that.
Okay.
Okay. So so what do you enjoy most about being an advocate, Laura?
I like, let's see, just being able to connect and say, hey, we have things in common. I might look different on the outside, but there's plenty that we have in common, and just being able to just bridge those gaps. I think I can do this. I can be an advocate, and it's not just about me. It's about speaking for other people with disabilities. Like, I can help give them a voice and say, this is what it's like, and this is my story, but my story also relates to your story because I'm a human too. And so just being able to build community along the way.
Okay, about building, yeah. So about helping to build community. Liz, what do you enjoy most?
I guess right now, it changes every day.
Right.
As I'm growing in my advocacy career. But right now I enjoy being a mentor to people. I get so excited when people say, can I be like you? Can I speak up? Can I do this? And I say, yes, you have. Yes. If looking back on my running around in a parking lot in Churchill, New Jersey, I literally ran around the parking lot and saying, no, I cannot speak up. Well, look at me now. And if I can do that, so can other people.
So can other people do. And one of those I know is there's a young woman named Martha Haythorne who is in Atlanta, who is now in the Atlanta area with the help of the DD Council, started a Mondays with Martha that's kind of copied after Tuesdays with Liz. So that's one of the people that she's been a mentor. So Liz, what's the hardest part of being an advocate for you?
The hardest is I guess the hardest is just knowing that I can be myself. If I say something stupid, or if am I going to get in trouble? If I'm saying something and people look up to me, so I take that seriously. I have a responsibility to people. I don't know how old you are, Laura, but I need to take that seriously. I need to take it seriously when Martha wants to be looking up to me. Am I saying something wrong that will lead her down the wrong path? And am I saying something that might not make the most sense to her?
Got it. Are we getting her way? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Laura, what about you? What do you enjoy most? And I know you said something there about being community building and so on, but what do you enjoy and what's the hardest part? Let's go to the hardest part. You did talk about it, what you enjoyed. Yeah.
I'd say the hardest part is that it's constant, and it can feel like I have to do most of the work at times, and I don't really get a break because anywhere I go, like whatever interaction I'm having could turn into a moment of advocacy. So it feels like my brain is always like on trying to process, oh, well, I'm at Panera and I'm meeting a stranger. Are they about to ask me a question? And do I have to come up with the answer right now? So just the fact that it feels like it's a constant part of my life.
Which says something about how, I think for both of you, says something about how pervasive, and how common are the kinds of attitudes that get in people's way, or the kinds that people have about disabilities. And I bet you both have gotten pretty good at picking up when people are uncomfortable about how to talk with you, or you could see that they're seeing you not for kind of who you are, but for some other kind of image that they might have of a person with a disability.
Yes.
And can I also add, another thing that is hard for me is that I need to realize that I can make a mistake.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting last week or the week before here at AUCD, and I spoke a lot. And yes, it was a meeting that I knew a lot and I had a lot to share and whatever, but as a leader, you need to allow other people a chance to talk and to learn how to become a leader and whatever. And so sometimes I beat myself up and say, oh, no, you're a leader, but you made a mistake. Well, yes, you made a mistake, but you can still be a leader and you can move on.
That's I know a lot of priests and rabbis who would deal with the same kind of thing about knowing when to be quiet and let other people talk, and also forgive themselves when they make a mistake. So, Laura, say some more about how you've been an advocate within your own congregation or with other churches.
Well, teaching the kids for 4 years meant I was having little moments along the way to teach them about disability. And that led me to teach my new adult friends to ask me questions as well. And a big one actually was last summer. I shared my whole testimony in front of my whole church.
Wow.
And I spoke about actually leaving my church for about a month, 2 years ago. There was just different reasons, and I experienced different church communities where I felt like I was excluded or invisible or just not welcomed in these new environments. And I returned to my church and had a profound sense of, wow, these people see me in a crowd, and they don't just see me, they know me, and I have a community here, and I am just Laura. Like, sure, I can talk about disability and things, but they see me as a person, and I know I'm a fellow church member there, and I have gifts that I can use within my church. Speaking to my whole church last summer kind of opened up people's perspectives, and I can see a difference in that new people are saying hi to me, or it just broke down more barriers that I didn't really know existed, because now it feels like, oh, people are saying hi and just being more aware of how to help me. And I can just be in church on a Sunday morning and somebody will walk by and give me a hug. And I think sometimes that's the most profound thing, because it tells me I am seen in this crowd and I have a place here and I am valued for me being me.
Well, for both of you and for you and when you're a church, but Liz, when you get up and speak in front of a big group like that, there are probably a lot of other people saying, "Oh, I'm glad she's doing that, not me," or they might be anxious about doing that, and you're having the willingness to do that. I think that will impress people in different ways. Liz, say some things about what you do within your synagogue.
I'm the co-chair of our inclusion committee. Right now, we're advocating for a bathroom and an accessible stall in the restroom that is closest to the in the sanctuary. There is a accessible stall, but it's pretty far from the sanctuary. It's across it's almost down the hall, down it's like down the hall from the sanctuary. So it's not convenient if you need to use it after the service or during like my husband likes to go to the restroom before the kiddush, which is our lunch after the service, and so we're trying to do that, and that's a challenge because the board doesn't necessarily see the purpose of spending the money to use that, but we're going to try to advocate for that. And then I have spoken at Jewish Disability Awareness Month. I think you said access bill.
Yeah, that's right, and that was wrong. Yep. Thank you for correcting me.
But for the last 4 or 5 years, I have spoken at synagogues, including my own synagogue, about my life and what I would like in my life, or what other people would like in their lives. And so, and I just would like to share a story about inclusion, because I think this inclusion has a lot to do with this as well. Can I do that now, Bill?
Let me get a couple more questions in and we'll come back to that. All right. Okay. Share something about it. Let me just ask the question. Do both of your congregations, do they know about what you do outside of the congregation, and do they support that? Do they, like Laura, do they know about your blog and support your speaking at places? And Liz, does your synagogue know what your Monday through Friday job is and what you do, and how do they support you?
Yeah, a few years ago when I was doing more of my blog writing and I opened up the question and answer series, I realized, like, hey, I need to share my blog with my own church community. I shouldn't be hiding this. Like, they need to know these things too. And so nowadays, my church community, they read my blog, they encourage me along the way, they pray for me. And sometimes friends will open up conversations for me if they want to, like, having a moment of advocating in the middle of the church service or something. Like, they know I don't know somebody, so they help bridge those gaps with me. And they also give me space sometimes to process my own thoughts. If I'm preparing for a speaking event or something, we will sit around and just talk about all these aspects of my life, and it helps me to hear their perspective, because sometimes friends will be like, I've never met someone with a disability, and so it becomes a learning experience for both of us, and it's like expands both of our perspectives, which ends up helping me with my writing and speaking as well.
Got it. Liz, do they know what you do?
I think so. I have interviewed a rabbi, I think 2 years ago for Jewish Disability Inclusion Month. I have talked about my advocacy on Capitol Hill. I had the honor of being in the field for Senator Casey last year, and also I was a witness in the Kavanaugh hearing, and both of those experienced people definitely. I actually spoke about that, about the Casey Fellowship to our synagogue in our summer series last year. So I know that they know about that. The Kavanaugh hearing, I think that sometimes I wonder whether people really are patronizing me and saying, "Oh, geez, this is cute. You're a disabled person. You're a person with a disability. Ha ha ha." I am actually advocating,
Right.
and I think I do a good job, or at least that's what I've been told, that I do a good job. I'm not just here as a token, and I hope that people think that. Don't think that I'm a token.
Right. Courtney, let's move it on to the next slide. So what do you have favorite stories about disability in the Bible? Or places where you think, what does the Bible might say to us about disability and advocacy?
Do you want me to start?
Sure, that's fine. Go ahead.
My favorite story is about Moses and how he had a speech impairment, and how he was chosen by God to be the leader of the movement. And that to me says that even though you have a disability, you can be a leader.
So after Moses. Okay, Laura?
I also think of Moses at times too, because he was called by God and he was able to do what he was supposed to do through his weakness. And I also think about like Paul having the thorn in his side, or the weakness, but that he was still able to have the power of God work through him in order to do his calling.
Or the sense of calling about that, yeah.
So I think both of them are just examples of God using people who look weak to the world, but he can make them strong enough to do their calling.
And do you see your advocacy as being a kind of calling for you?
Yes.
Or like a vocation or a calling, a sense that this is what I'm doing, what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yes, and I think I've grown into that more in the past few years, just because I realized I can do this. I might not be able to do other jobs in the world, but I can do this, and all my interactions that happen in public end up being advocacy moments. So I feel like I live out my calling in the everyday. So yes, I definitely feel like it's my calling.
Liz, you want to respond to that?
I'm not sure that it is a calling. I guess it's a responsibility that I have to my fellow advocates, my friends. I need to be the one to speak up, because who else will speak up? Who else want to do that? I want to. And it's my responsibility to help other people to do what I do, because I won't be here forever.
Okay. And does that sense of responsibility come from just your sense of community with those folks, or do you have that, I know in Judaism, for instance, there's a real clear sense of responsibility for trying to, heal the breach, or, to tikkun olam, to respond to the needs of people who may be oppressed.
I never thought about that, but maybe deep down inside, since I'm Jewish and I come from a deep Jewish background, maybe I am. Maybe that's where it started, but I never knew that till probably now.
We talked a little bit before. Well, I think I think Christians use the word calling more, but in that sense of like call to ministry or things like that. Whereas I think in Judaism, there you got story after story in the Hebrew Bible about God calling a particular person to go and do this, do that, or calling to Samuel, or or anointing a prophet, and these things. So the wording is a bit different, and people use a little bit different sense of wording. But there's, I think it's very much a sense. I think for you to use the word responsibility to help others is a clear sense of kind of the call to action that comes out of, I think, both traditions.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You wanted to tell us an inclusion story.
Yes. My father died when we were in Italy with our synagogue, and this was probably our third trip we took with the synagogue, and we had a lot of friends there, and we just have, these are our friends, and we love them. We love to travel with them. And my father died, and I found the aisle in our hotel room. Obviously, where I found that out was in my room with just Phil, my husband, and myself. And then when I got downstairs after, and then I needed to get the rabbi to help me to figure out what to do and all that, or when I needed to leave, people were there to give me a big hug. And if I didn't know it already after 3 trips by this time, I didn't know it at that moment. I knew that my temple family was my family, because they were there to give me a big hug. I remember when I first got off of the elevator, and people didn't know, but I was obviously very upset, so I said, I just found out that my dad died, or whatever I said, and I remember exactly who hugged me for the first time. And we eventually stayed through the weekend, through Shabbat, because it just made the most sense for Bill and I and our family for us to stay. But I can tell you that if I didn't feel comfortable at that time, then my family, my Temple family would not be supportive, I probably would have gone back on the first airplane that I could, because I stayed 3 extra days, and that was really hard for me to stay 3 extra days, being separate from my family, and I really wanted to get back to be with my real family, and just deal with everything I needed to deal with. But on the other hand, it was great to be with my Temple family.
Temple family. So it had that sense of, I think both of you have talked a bit about the sense of really feeling like you belong.
Yeah.
In your respective faith communities. I don't know if we've got any questions. I haven't seen any on the chat thing, but I wondered if anybody has some questions that they would like to ask. If you do have it, but if not, let's go back to the last question. So what if you had to what key lessons have you learned about being an advocate? What kind of tips would you have to share with others?
I think one that I've learned is just, if I'm open to discussing disability, that makes other people more open and they feel more comfortable with asking the questions. And then that leads to the honest conversations, which helps to build the real community. And the other side of that is, if I'm comfortable with who I am, if I'm meeting somebody new, that means they're more likely to be comfortable around me as well. And so it ties back into, then we can have the conversations, which helps us to build the real relationships.
Okay, great. Liz?
I have to agree with Laura. And then I would also add that you have to be okay with making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to also take a step back and listen, because if you can, yes, I like to be the star of the show, and I won't deny it. I like being the star of the show. I think I grew up realizing that I'm the star of the show from my family, and because my father was the star of the show, so I somehow wanted to be the star of the show, but I realized I can't be the star of the show because other people need to be the stars of the show.
Well, I want to thank the two of you for being the stars of this show and this webinar today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I was worried we would maybe be short. I think we could have done 2 hours, follow up on some of the questions. But I hope you can imagine people saying thank you and clapping. And for being here, and we'll be able to refer people back to this webinar so people can see you who didn't have a chance to see you. The next webinar, the last in our spring series, is on the state-of-the-art practices in inclusive religious education. And we've got one of the best people in the North America in inclusive religious education, Barbara Newman, as the presenter with maybe 1 or 2 guests. She's still working on that, but it's if you haven't heard Barbara Newman and seen her in action and seeing what I'll be really interested in seeing what she says about this, because I spoke at an event she invited me to speak at not 6 months or so ago, and she asked me to say, okay, what do you think are the key things happening around inclusive ministry? And we've asked her to do that around inclusive religious education. Next slide, please. Now we're going to start the collaborative will start thinking about webinars for the fall and into the spring of next year. So we'd love your suggestions about topics or issues, or suggestions of presenters. You might know people who've got something really good that would be helpful to people interested in this intersections of spirituality and theology and ministry and religion and disability. So let us know what kind of things might be questions in your mind, or people who have something that could be of help to others. And finally, a final plea for, or invitation, not a plea. We've got a great group coming to the Summer Institute on Theology and Disability, which is going to be happening in Holland, Michigan, in just about 3 more weeks. And at some point, we're going to have to make sure Laura and Liz have a chance to come to that and speak, and have some time for people to interact with them, and to be part of this institute, which has brought people together from many different faith backgrounds in a number of countries, and a representation of more and more people working in this area. Again, thank you very much, and thanks to Courtney Evans-Taylor for being our moderator and TA person behind the scenes at the Kennedy Center at Vanderbilt. Have a great day, everybody, and again, thank you, Laura and Liz.
Thank you.